Hello. This lesson is designed for a 7th grade science class with students that range from 11 to 12 years old. The title of the lesson is Weather and Climate with a focus on relative humidity and dew points. The lesson will be taught over 2 days, with the first day being a brief overview and some key terms and concepts about weather. The second day will be longer, with students actually performing the experiment. Day 1 will start out with me asking the students a simple question. With a show of hands, how many of us have ever walked outside on a hot summer day and immediately began to sweat because of the moisture in the air? After letting them reflect for a few seconds, I will tell them that this is due to moisture in the air in the form of humidity. I will then tell them what humidity is. Humidity is the presence of water vapor in air. In normal room air, there is typically about 1% water vapor, but it is widely present in greater or lesser amounts. High humidity makes hot days feel even hotter. Low humidity can give people a feeling of a dry throat or sensations of static when touching things. Next, I will tell them the definition for dew point. Dew point is the temperature at which condensation would occur if a gas were cooled. Dew point is a useful measure for 2 reasons. The dew point tells us what temperature to keep a gas to prevent condensation. Dew point is an absolute measure of the gas humidity and relates directly to the amount of water vapor present. I will then go on to tell them that there is a way that we can determine relative humidity and dew point right here in school with the use of materials that make up a psychrometer. A psychrometer is an instrument that can be used to determine relative humidity and dew points. The beginning of the lesson will be done on the smartboard. I will go to education.com to show students how we are going to be making a psychrometer right in the classroom. After I have gained their interest in the experiment, I will pre-teach vocabulary words by activating students' prior knowledge about weather. This will also be done on the smartboard through a series of short videos about the different key terms. Students will then fill out a guided notes handout that is based on the vocabulary and key concepts that they learned about the weather. This will serve as a way to reinforce information in an organized manner. For homework, students will fill out a graphic organizer with weather as the theme and writing key elements about weather. Day 2 of the lesson will be centered around the experiment. I will split up the students into 4 groups of 5. Each student will be assigned a role for their group. One student will be in charge of making sure that all the materials are accounted for at the beginning and end of the experiment. This student will also be recording the data that the group comes up with of relative humidity and dew point readings. That will be recorded onto an iPad. One student will be the leader and in charge of reading the instructions to make sure that the psychrometer is being assembled correctly. The remaining 3 students will assemble the psychrometer and conduct the experiment. Our class has 2 English language learners and a child with autism named Stephen. For these students, they will be provided with modifications. Stephen has poor social interaction skills, needs to follow a set schedule, and is happy when he gets small rewards. Stephen will be grouped with students who have strong organizational skills and are caring. A paraprofessional will also be assigned to this group to observe the student interactions and to make sure that there are no negative triggers that will set Stephen off in the wrong direction. There will be a poster on the wall right next to his group for each day of the lesson that explicitly lists all the steps that will go into the lesson so that the student will know what to expect over the course of the day. I will also have a reward system in place for students who are following instructions and behaving properly. I will make sure that Stephen is praised in front of his peers when he does the right thing. He will be provided with scaffolds until they can be gradually taken away. The 2 English language learners will be provided with handouts in both English and in Spanish. They will work in the same group so that they will be able to help each other throughout the lesson. Their English-speaking peers in the group will be 3 of the higher level students in the class, so they can help guide them through the process of the experiment. The paraprofessional in the room will also be nearby to help. These students will be provided with an iPad so they could use it for Google Translator. For the experiment, students will be assembling a psychrometer and use it to determine relative humidity and dew points. The steps for the experiment will be provided in a handout as well as posted on the wall for students to see. Steps to the experiment are as follows. Wrap a strip of gauze around the base of the first thermometer. Wrap a rubber band around the gauze to keep it in place. Fill the jar with several inches of water. Put the wrapped thermometer into the jar, making sure the bulb is under the water. Tape the second thermometer of the outside of the jar. Leave the psychrometer outside for at least 15 minutes. Write down the time and the readings of the two thermometers in the provided table. These are the materials needed to conduct the experiment. Cloth, tape, a glass with water, two thermometers, one of them having a cloth tied around the end with a rubber band. There are two thermometers. One is called a dry bulb and one is called the wet bulb. The wet bulb gets a cloth around it, which is secured by a rubber band. Both thermometers should be at the same temperature before conducting the experiment. Both thermometers are around 25 degrees Celsius at the start. You begin by taking the wet bulb with the cloth on the end and submerge it in the glass of water. After leaving the thermometer in the glass of water for 15 minutes, the wet bulb dropped down to 18 degrees Celsius, and the dry bulb is still around 25 degrees Celsius. You then take the dry bulb and your wet bulb and you subtract them to get your wet bulb difference, which for us is 7 degrees Celsius. 25 minus 18, dry from the wet, we get 7 degrees Celsius. Then you are going to use your dry bulb temperature and your difference to get your relative humidity and dew point. The dry bulb thermometer measures air pressure. As water evaporates from the wet bulb, it lowers the temperature of the wet bulb thermometer. The greater the difference in temperature between the two thermometers, the drier the air. So now you will go to your relative humidity and dew point charts and look up your data. First you will get your dew point chart and look up 25 degrees for the dry bulb. Then you will go over 7 spots to find the wet bulb difference. This will put you between a 12 and 15 degree dew point, which means the air is relatively dry today. You will record that it is approximately a 13 degree dew point when you take the average. You will then do the exact same thing for humidity on the relative humidity chart. You will go to 25 degrees on the dry bulb side, then go over 7 spaces for the wet bulb difference, and we find that we have a humidity of approximately 50%. This means that the air is holding 50% of its capacity. After the students get their readings, their group will present their finding in front of the class. All of the group's data will be compared to see if everyone approximately came up with the same relative humidity and dew points. Once all of the groups are done presenting, they will be asked to complete a worksheet with questions about the lesson and turn it in for a grade. I will be using the worksheets as an assessment to determine if my students were able to successfully master the material. Here is some of the vocabulary that we will be working with that will go into the questions on the assessment worksheet. Psychrometer, air pressure, moisture, relative humidity, evaporation, thermometer, atmosphere, weather, water vapor, and condensation. And finally, here are some of the Common Core state standards that will be applied for the experiment. Apply mathematical skills to describe the natural world. Use appropriate scientific tools such as metric rulers, spring scale, graph paper, thermometers to solve problems about the natural world. Identify similarities and differences between explanations received from others or in print and personal observations or understandings. Carry out their plans for exploring phenomena through direct observation and through the use of simple instruments that permit measurement of quantities such as length, mass, volume, temperature, and time, and record observations accurately and concisely. That concludes the lesson. Thank you very much.